Hello and welcome to Merchandising Insights for the New Decade. This automotive news power training webinar is brought to you by HomeNet. We're delighted you're with us today for this presentation. My name is Phil Nussel. I'm the online editor here at Automotive News in Detroit. Before I introduce our speaker today, I wanted to give you all a few navigation tips. First, we encourage you to ask questions at any time. You just type them into the Q&A box on the left side of the webinar window and then hit submit. I'll steer your questions to our speaker toward the end of the session. Also, to enlarge the slides, you just grab the frame with your mouse and you pull it larger. To download the slides, click on the folder icon at the bottom of your console. So today's speaker is Russ Daniels. Russ is Director of Product Marketing at HomeNet Automotive and vAuto. His primary focus has been working with HomeNet sales and business development teams to launch innovative merchandising and syndication product offerings for dealers along with industry peer partners. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Russ right now to get us started. Russ, have at it.
Great. Thanks, Phil. And thanks, everybody, for joining the webinar today, spending a little bit of time with me. Always appreciate connecting with dealers and other folks in the automotive industry to talk about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and that's online vehicle merchandising. Been in the industry for over a decade now and have seen the industry evolve. And one of the ways that I kind of framed it and thought about it was in an ebook, a kind of larger, we called it meta-analysis we did at HomeNet and Cox Automotive, called the 2019 State of Automotive Merchandising. And we really dug into research that was available both within Cox Automotive and outside of our walls to really have a true understanding of the importance of merchandising, both to the car shopper and enabling that process to drive more profitability for the dealership. But there's another angle there, and it's also the efficiency angle. You're leveraging new technology that's available today at your dealership to get the job done easier. The best way to do that, in addition to leveraging new technology, is understanding the insights and best practices that are out there, so you're making good decisions as dealer operators in terms of how you're investing your time. So we're going to dig into that today, and to kind of frame it up, I like to use this visual to kind of counter to both of the situations I laid out. There is a lot of technology, and consumer expectations in technology, they've risen significantly and continue to rise quickly. And they're doing a lot of research online. We'll dig into that specific in automotive, and that's not earth-shattering news. But their expectations of technology overall are at an all-time high, so we need to deliver those experiences when we're advertising our vehicles, when we're advertising our inventory, to kind of meet those expectations. And when it comes to merchandising, it's holistic, from price all the way to how you're visualizing and showing that inventory. And as we move forward and the technology continues to grow, also how you can target consumers with really relevant content within your merchandising. It's really exciting to see how it's going. But again, there's another side to this whole technology piece, and that's we have more technology at our hands to get the job done more efficiently at our dealership, while still keeping quality high. So as I bring that down into today's presentation and then into automotive, that's really what I'm going to dig into. And I'm going to take bits and pieces out of that State of Automotive Merchandising case study that we did at the end of last year. All the insights and best practices are still very relevant today as we move into 2020. When we're looking at the importance of merchandising, when we're identifying those areas of improvement using insights and technology, and then we're going to step through those key areas of merchandising, and we kind of take those into 7 specific actions. Let's start with the consumer piece, though, and kind of look at the importance of merchandising across the board. So when you look at the consumer now and you look at the buyer, this is in automotive. A lot of great studies going on. This one's a lot is from Cox Automotive Car Buyer Journey study. And you see a lot of those. What I want to bring your attention to is the buyer spending 96 days on average in market, down 22 days from 2017. What's that really telling us? That's telling us that the process is being more efficient, that consumers demand high-quality information quicker than ever before, because they're using all these different areas, whether it's the website, whether it's third-party listing sites, whether it's social media. We'll dig into the trends going on there in terms of merchandising on social media sites. They're getting that job done quicker. And that also means there's this shrinking window of opportunity to connect with them with your inventory. So that brings even more light onto the importance of high-quality automotive merchandise. You have less time to connect with them online, obviously less time to connect with them in store as well. Not to mention, when you're merchandising and marketing those cars online, competition is fierce, especially on third-party sites, especially on social media sites, and pay-per-click and retargeting destinations. A lot of competing dealers, we're competing for very similar eyeballs. And you've got to have that marketing strategy in place to be able to connect with them, but that's kind of half of it, and you need to connect the merchandising to it. So when they do inevitably land on that inventory, what are they going to be able to see? What information are they going to be able to experience? How are you going to drive them deeper into that inventory before they kind of contact you in person? We're going to walk through a lot of those things. So very much the digital buyer now, digital retailing, or at least starting that process online. I'm seeing something here. Just want to make sure, Phil. Can everybody hear me okay? It looks like just someone's having an issue and is having trouble hearing something. Just make sure I'm coming through okay. Looks like I am. All right, well, I'll press forward and, yeah. Okay, fine, awesome. Thank you. Just wanted to confirm. Looks like there's someone in the chat that was having some audio issues. So, again, the digital buyer, but we need to now flip it over to you and your operations in terms of merchandising at your dealership. And before we do that, how important is merchandising to getting the job done? And that really connects to how much you invest your time. So we did that. We looked at a study. We did this now at the end of 2018. And we kind of wanted to get the dealer's perspective, everybody, big kind of study we did, to look at the importance of merchandising and how differentiated they think their merchandising is. And this is just a really telling stat in terms of where we are. For 80% of dealers believe that improved online merchandising can help their business, and that means in terms of profitability, in terms of car sales. But within that same study, the dealers, just over 10%, felt that they were different from anybody else. So we know it's important, but we don't really know how to stand out, which again is so important as we're putting marketing plans in place and putting dollars into marketing to be able to drive them to our vehicle details pages. Can we stand out from other dealerships? So we're really going to dig deeper into there. But it's also a element of getting it done as well, getting the job done. And when we asked dealers kind of how they were getting this job done, over 45% are still doing a lot of this stuff manually. And when I say stuff, I mean things like video, things like vehicle descriptions, even manually posting inventory to sites. I think that a really important thing that we want to take away from today is really get our mental model shifted to using technology and letting that work for you to really help compelling listings faster and still keeping that quality high. And with me kind of working kind of on the HomeNet vAuto side and Cox Automotive, I've been really just excited and impressed about how the technology has evolved, even compared to just 2, 3, 4 years ago, where things like generating vehicle descriptions and generating videos, just a lot more compelling content for everybody to take a look at. So we're going to dive into that. So now we're going to kind of look at identifying those areas for improvement in your merchandising. 2 key areas. The first one is around speed, but still keeping the quality high, and that's letting the technology work for you. And then kind of this concept of merchandising and re-merchandising it. We'll talk about that, especially in terms of photos and vehicle descriptions. So as that car moves through its age cycle, being able to perform different merchandising, different techniques, to be able to grab more eyeballs and refresh that listing. And how we're going to break that down is to kind of 7, let's call them action areas, to improve your strategy. And I like this slide because it kind of looks, kind of comprehensively across the 7 areas we're going to talk about. And we'll dig into all 7 of them in a bit of detail. But there's other elements to this, right? You got to have a really good market-based pricing strategy. You got to know your buyer. You got to know your inventory, and you're the subject matter experts. the more I dig into that, the more we kind of are maturing in that side of our business. But then when you go into some of these more advanced merchandising techniques, even some of the basics, I still see them get lost, or I see them just being done in a inefficient way, so we can clean it up. Things like being able to put photos on quickly and versus stock photos, and how does that drive engagement, how those photos look and the content you serve them in there, and then start to get into the differentiated experience of 360 displays, of being able to use live video or even stitched video, and how that's driving consumer activity, along with vehicle descriptions. And then you could do all of those things, but if we're not able to syndicate or distribute that inventory to the places where consumers are, and also the tools you're using to get things done. So if you're distributing online inventory and thinking about third-party sites, websites, social media, targeting, things like that, that's great. But also remember that you want to have the inventory online match what's displaying in your CRM, what's displaying potentially on the F&I side. So as a sales rep or someone in your business development centers having conversations, it's kind of mirroring the same thing that consumers are looking at as we know they do that research online. So let's start digging into these 7 key action items. First one, we're going to start with kind of that foundation. What's definitely essential, but still something that I think we can elevate and do a little bit better, and that's vehicle photos. And we know that consumers are desiring and requiring us to have actual photos of the car. I'm going to dig into that a little bit. But I use the 24 photos on used car on average and the 19 photos on new car on average just to kind of frame the conversation. Where we pulled this from was over 7 million vehicles, kind of actively created listings online, a whole bunch of data that I have access to just across the board, just to be able to look at, on average, how many photos are on using a new car in the retail space. So it's kind of a benchmark, kind of think about how you're doing it, but also remember, you're the subject matter expert, and every car can be treated a little differently. So a hard and fast rule about how many photos you take on the inventory may not always work. For example, you might have a pretty base level sedan on the used car side. Maybe 24 photos, you don't need all those to tell that story. On the other side of it, you might have a fully loaded truck, or you're on the Highline luxury side, and you want to really get into those features of the truck or the technology package or other value-added benefits that are in that luxury inventory, and 24 photos it makes sense to take more, at least those, maybe more. Same with new car, it's very similar. We still are leveraging stock photos a lot, but we're seeing new car photos drive VDP traffic. And the most interesting part about these insights are these are growing year over year as we keep refreshing and looking at the data. It seems like the average of photos is increasing on the new car side, which is good. I definitely think we saw a little bit of a deficiency, and we thought stock photos were getting the job done on new car because a lot of similar colors, similar models, but we're finding for 2 reasons that new vehicle photos are driving more traffic. It's the actual car, it's putting them into that more immersive experience that consumers demand, but also if you're kind of following along with what a lot of the third-party classified sites are doing, what search engines do as well, they're rewarding dealers and products for getting the real VIN-specific data around photos, specifically on third-party sites. They're rewarding them with higher rankings. So there's the consumer kind of experience side, but there's also the technology and third-party side that's rewarding you for completely merchandising the inventory. So if you are a franchise dealer and you're thinking about a new car photo strategy, definitely something to look into, and I'm sure you're taking photos on used. But the big question is, let's kind of quantify that a little bit more and look at, is it driving engagement compared to stock photos and no photos? And if you see here in the slide, this is a recent study done based off of AutoTrader site data, vehicle details page traffic for inventory in different, let's call them phases. For example, just one single actual photo of the car versus a stock photo. What's the increase on average on vehicle details pages across new and used? Well, you're seeing that there. You're seeing significant lift even with one photo, one real photo of the car compared to a stock photo. Again, it gets the consumer into that immersive experience and actually gets them to look at this VIN, not just this year, make, model. I think in terms of a buyer journey, a consumer might be there at some point, but when they're really starting to look at the inventory, they want to see the car that they're going to go and learn more information and engage with. I think this speaks to something else. This is another efficiency gain that I've talked about a lot with dealers over the years. And this is that concept on the used car side, when you buy a car at auction or you get a car in on trade, pretty decent condition. Do we wait till that car is fully through reconditioning to go in and shoot the photos and do the merchandising? Well, studies we've found is about half of dealers, it takes them 7 or more days to recondition a car. So you're losing that opportunity, that shrinking window of opportunity with consumers, if you aren't thinking about what I call a pre-merchandising strategy, where if you do have a piece of inventory off of trade, off lease, whatever the situation is, and it looks pretty good, decent condition, you don't have to do really a lot of work on the reconditioning side on the exterior, take 1 to 3 photos of that car, get that online. We're seeing now that it's driving increased vehicle details page traffic. Similar thing on the new car side. If you get some cars off the truck, you've got the PDI and the post-delivery inspection. Maybe there is some cleaning that needs to be done. Another strategy to do as well, once you have that new car, take a photo or two of the actual one to drive that traffic from a vehicle details page perspective. Also remember that you'll get rewarded on third-party sites for using that tactic. The one to the right is even more compelling. And I think we're doing this today. We know that multiple custom photos, whether it's that 24-ish photos on used or 19-ish photos on new, driving the traffic, but just how much? I mean, just staggering traffic on third-party sites for multiple photos versus a stock photo. I mean, that's a big number right there across both. So if you have a strategy in place, good job. If you feel like you're not getting enough coverage, that's something you really need to look into. And also the speed in which, be able to do that 3 days or less, as we talked about before. Or just shorten up that time to market so you're connecting with those consumers quickly and driving the eyeballs. But we also know that photos are just kind of the start of it, just taking the right photos. That takes time. You start to get that right. The next step that you look into is, what type of content then should I add within the photo to differentiate myself? Again, because just over 10% of us think that our merchandising is differentiated from someone else. Here's a couple things to consider. The first one is kind of eliminating distractions around the vehicle within the photo. So there's a couple different things that have led me to say, hey, using a photo backgrounding type of solution makes sense. A couple different things. Before I go there, as I said, technology has evolved. It really has in this space. I remember right when I got started in the industry, there was photo backgrounding solutions, but vehicles were being put on Mars or put on the beach, and that might sound kind of comical, but it was actually what was happening. And that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about really focusing the consumer on the vehicle, on the thing you really want them to focus on. And sometimes it can be distracting. Sometimes the environment around the dealership isn't conducive to having even the proper lighting or placement, or number of different reasons why a background, maybe there's something on the other side of the street that you don't want to put inside of that photo. So being able to take that vehicle out and put it into like a photo booth type of experience is driving vehicle details page traffic, 5%, pretty, not as staggering as photos versus stock photos, but still significant. And also consumers were finding really strong appeal in backgrounded photos versus non, because it does focus them. So one other thing on the backgrounded photos, there's kind of the physical piece of it that I've seen, which it means install a photo booth at your dealership to be able to get this job done. That's one option to do, but we know that's not always an option for everybody. There's the space limitations that come into play. And I think most of us would agree, most of the people at our dealership would agree, that we're not going to kind of move things around or do construction to take service bays away to put a photo booth in. You're going to really have to show strong ROI in your backgrounded photos to really justify that. And again, sometimes it's just the investment's not there either. These things cost a good bit of money sometimes to install in the store. Not for everybody. You can create really good-looking photos and really good merchandising if you have the luxury of having a photo booth. But again, the technology has evolved over the years to a place where if that's not an option for you, you can let the technology work for you. And there's a lot of providers out there offering photo backgrounding solutions. So you can kind of eliminate that logistical hurdle, take photos where it makes sense in your dealership, still make the cars kind of pop out, the listings pop, and differentiate yourself a little bit from your competitor. So definitely something to consider. Sticking on the photo concept, let's talk a little bit about how we're kind of injecting content and doing photo overlays inside of those photos. In my opinion, this is one of the biggest untapped areas in merchandising for the automotive industry, because we're still using dealership branding on our first photo, and that's good, and you still want to do that, especially on third-party sites, to add that branding at the store level. And a lot of consumers do kind of gravitate towards kind of that business level reputation. I'll go into a couple things there in just a second. But then there's also an opportunity as they move through the photos to inject really relevant content. Content like you're seeing here around navigation and Bluetooth. And what you're looking at in terms of percentages are a consumer test we ran about how to kind of message that. Is it nav and Bluetooth, kind of this quick to the point society that we live in, or should you spell it out? Consumers actually gravitated towards the more spelling out. And this is because when they're thinking about these equipment options and this content you're putting in, they're deeper into that buyer funnel, so they really want to understand what's going on inside of this car, what's kind of motivating them to move forward. So something to just consider there. But yeah, like I said, it's a big untapped area because I'm still seeing a lot of photos out there without relevant content, without helping them navigate what type of equipment is there. That's one thing. Another good best practice is what I call kind of teaser content, where you have a picture of the kind of exterior, and you talk a little bit about the technology inside of the car. That's compelling them to move forward into those interior photos. Because depending on the type of equipment and options there, it might be pretty obvious that they're looking at the navigation. They're looking at the different technology that's in there. But if you put that in the exterior of the photo, and they're like, okay, this car does have the technology that I'm looking for, I want to go further into the experience, just a good way to tease them. Again, it might be in the description, it might be in the equipment lower down in the vehicle details page. We're not quite sure if the consumer is going to get all the way down there, but we do know they're looking at that visual media like photos and videos. Another best practice is to put a little bit of a promotion within the photo stream. I see this coming more and more. It's still something to take advantage of. So for example, if you've got like 20 photos and maybe around position 7 or 8, just as an example, it's not a picture of the car anymore. It's some information about your dealership, about your reputation in the community, about promotions that you're doing. Kind of think about it like a little commercial or a quick ad. A lot of people go on YouTube and they're looking at videos and ads kind of pop to them. That's kind of the society we live in. There's an opportunity to do that within the photos, and technology across the industry is enabling that to happen. So just a couple different things to differentiate how you're taking photos and then what information you're putting in them to distinguish you from other dealerships. This is great. So now you got your photos going, you know the best practices there, and you want to kind of step it up now. What other kind of visual media is out there? And 360 displays are another really good avenue to explore. Again, a lot of providers out there offering technology like this. You also have third-party sites, websites, other kind of marketing entities that are being able to take these 360 displays, utilize them in their networks, utilize them in their listings. So it's great to see not only the capture side of 360, which is really getting strong, but also the display side of 360. So now you can have consumers viewing the inventory in numerous different channels. This concept is not new to automotive, and for anyone that's not clear what this is, essentially, a lot of different mobile applications out there. You walk around the car, then you can take an interactive 360 spin where a consumer can click and move around and really kind of choose their own adventure in terms of how they look at that inventory. Very immersive. Saw it in a lot of industry. You got Zappos that kind of did that with their e-commerce website many years ago. It's moved into the real estate industry. When buying homes, you can kind of look at those 360 displays. And it's really starting to become more prominent and a way to stand out, a way to drive that quality engagement on websites and third-party sites. this compared to video? I'm actually going to get into video in a second, and video is still very important, and it's a useful tool, but it's just another way to connect with your audience. And it's getting better, it's getting easier to use compared to years prior. One thing we took a look at is we looked at consumers and what they thought of 360, and if it's really moving them through the buying process, or if it's helpful in their buying process. Overwhelmingly, consumers agreed that 360s were really helping them, or would have helped them if they had the option. And there's a lot of great quantified data out there around increased time on site, increased engagement on the website, because inherently a 360 display is very interactive. So it is going to keep them more engaged, but is it really driving them to want to test drive the car, to purchase that car? And the more and more we're kind of digging into this and seeing it, it's really becoming a viable area. And I did mention video, and I don't want to leave that out of the discussion, because just because 360 is coming and it's here now, it's not coming, it's here now. Doesn't mean we need to ignore videos, because videos are still driving a lot of activity and actually kind of increasing year over year the importance and utilization of automotive videos in our space. And it is quantified. So cars with videos get 18% more VDPs than those without. Again, we're rewarding dealers for doing this tactic, but it's also a great component to have to drive a consumer there, to view the video, to engage them. And it's not as immersive as a 360, but not everybody wants to interact with the 360 that way. But it is movement. It does provide more content. You can do the voiceover. You can do live walkarounds. You can do custom call-outs. A lot of great technology around video, something that's table stakes that you definitely want to have. And it always depends on inventory size. If you're a large dealership, you have couple hundred cars on the lot. It's really difficult to get a 360, a video, photos on all this inventory. The great news is, again, technology is starting to allow you to take video, 360, and photos almost simultaneously. But if we're kind of still using video solutions, unsure kind of the best way to leverage it, if you're taking photos, videos can still be generated. They can be generated as a stitch video. You can do the same voiceover, automated call-outs, and that's a good starting place. You'll get rewarded for having videos on third-party sites and search engines and all of that. And then you can be selective, both with 360 and with live video walkaround, in kind of two avenues. If you have a car that is struggling, it's not getting the eyeballs that you need, and you really want to start to think about what's my exit strategy, but while still keeping it into retail. Being able to put a live walk-around video just to make it immersive is something to do and supplement a potential price cut. Same with the 360. If you have a struggling piece of inventory, it can just help dress it up and re-merchandise that car to kind of give it some new life. Also, if you have a car that's selling really, really well, and you're in a really competitive area with other similar dealers carrying similar inventory, being able to do live walk-around video or 360 could be the way that you kind of engage deeper with the car shopper. As we're seeing in the research we've been reviewing, they want to do to be able to earn the right to kind of move forward with that shopper. To the right there, you see about a 9% increase in VDPs with video and vehicle descriptions, which is the sixth kind of action item that we're reviewing here in the presentation. Still very important. I think that naturally we're going to gravitate towards the visual side, the photos, the videos, and the 360s, and maybe invest our time a little bit more on the visual media side, and sometimes forget about descriptions or just be unsure what to do with them. So the first thing is they're still important for a couple reasons. They tell the story of that vehicle. There's a way to kind of organize the description to have it make a lot of sense. I'll go over that in a second. But again, let's think about not just the quality of the description, but also the technology that enables it. So when you think about different technology that's out there, automating vehicle descriptions was something that wasn't always done even 3-4 years ago, because we weren't really happy with how auto-generated comments looked. It was really generic. It was just not super compelling. Well, that's been something that's been getting better year over year as the different merchandising software get access to data that helps tell that story deeper, more third-party content, more condition information. We're able to get really specific about the car and take that load off of you from a manual perspective, but still creating something of quality. Not to mention that the vehicle-specific details in the description are also going to get that reward that I've been talking about in terms of search engines, in terms of websites and third-party sites. Just being able to have that content can help you show up better in search results. I talked to a lot of dealers about how to kind of go about doing this, whether it's going to be all manual. You know, a lot of dealers I talk to, they have really good ideas, and they really know this inventory at such a deep level. And, you know, it's something that almost becomes a passion project for them. But again, as your business grows or as things become, you know, quicker, I mean, you have less time to do more things, and I think that's true in our space more as much as any other space today. How do I want to go about if I'm doing it manually or if I'm leveraging technology? What are those key elements of building the description? And I kind of break it down into the 3 Bs. You want to be specific. You want to describe what makes this vehicle special, this VIN, not year, make, model, or their options, equipment, condition information, things like that that are really valuable in the description. But then you want to build the connection between you and kind of bring in that human element, telling the story of the dealership, what's special about that experience. And there are a lot of really, really good experiences, a lot of good benefits that you know, dealers I talk to all the time are coming up with. So really, really good to kind of not just think about the VIN, but think about the dealership and how you can drill out a connection. And then finally kind of balancing the message and reinforcing the value with other companies out there that are talking about your vehicles, taking major TV ads and really occupying a lot of space. Kelley Blue Book, J.D. Power, what type of awards and accolades and editorials are there to balance the message across your dealership and being specific. And again, we're seeing that 27% BDP increase, so it's definitely something we want to look at. So we've got just one action item left, and it's kind of putting it all together and being able to get those eyeballs on it, right? And that comes to now the syndication or online distribution. You can kind of look at how buyers are kind of looking at inventory, whether that's on dealer websites, third-party sites. You obviously have to have a strategy across both of them. And in the study that Car Buyer Journey, kind of looking at some of these top third-party sites, you got to make sure that you're on there. But as I've been talking about through the whole presentation, what's the best way to show up from a merchandising perspective? And we talked about kind of being complete with video and photos and descriptions and all those different elements to get rewarded on those sites. And then as those vehicles kind of move through their age cycle, being able to kind of re-merchandise them, if you will. We talked about pre-merchandising, which is doing it maybe pre-recon or until that car is fully frontline ready. And then there's re-merchandising, which is as that car moves through, being able to deploy different tactics to be able to gain more eyeballs and refresh the look and feel. One that's not listed on here, which is also really growing, is the presence on social media, both from a retargeting and a digital ad display perspective, but also as simple as a free site like Facebook Marketplace, which we're seeing in our side just grabbing a lot of eyeballs and a lot of attention. You see kind of how Facebook is shifting a lot of their marketing and a lot of their positioning over to different types of groups and also kind of their marketplace side. And that's something that I can see continuing. And again, it's a free site, so you can take advantage of those eyeballs on the sites that consumers are. Great way to kind of put it together. And I mentioned this before. Let's always think a little bit broader too than just websites, third-party sites, and being able to have our inventory there. Think about how the inventory online can match the other tools that you're using in your dealership, your CRM, other tools that you're using to interact with customers, just so you're speaking the same language. And that can be rather complex sometimes. So that's why, again, letting the technology work for you, investigating technology that can streamline this, make your operation more efficient, but also differentiate yourself online. So that's it, what I had today. Just a couple final thoughts that I've been touching on. Let technology make your life easier. Investigate it. It can do it. A lot of things, it's tools you already have access to. See if you can get deeper into that merchandising capabilities inside of that tool. just to make your process more efficient, make your life easier. Follow benchmarks. Use insights for listing and merchandising. Make sure you understand vehicle details, page traffic, engagement through your efforts. So you're making sure you're investing your time wisely and learning as you go. And just knowing that complete listings that generate engagement, you're going to get the eyeballs because you're getting rewarded on search engines, third-party sites, websites for doing just that. So that's what I had for you today. I know we have plenty of time, and would love to hear any questions that the audience has, and happy to address them. So Phil, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Russ. There was some great information in there. I learned a couple things for editing my own website, for God's sakes. So we're going to turn it over to the audience now, and we have plenty of time for the questions. I'll start with this one here. But are there some other metrics or data that we need to go over that we didn't get to during your presentation? Some more metrics that dealers should use in merchandising their inventory?
We talked a lot about vehicle details pages and search results pages. I think that's kind of table stakes now, Phil. We want to make sure we have a way of measuring that. But I think with a lot of advances, specifically in the marketing world, being able to actually look at things like leads and conversions and really get on that, those are where it's going. Other key metrics I just touched on briefly are like time on site. That's a good measure of engagement. Not always the best because there's obviously some they could be kind of idle on the site. But time on site, especially if you're using the differentiated tools like videos and 360s are really, really helpful. And then I think there's the internal metrics. There's having really, really strong reporting or a really strong sense of how long it takes to get the car fully merchandised and online, as well as kind of breaking your inventory down into different buckets of profitability to figure out kind of how quickly you want to move them.
All right. Maybe go back over a little bit more on SEO. Talk about how to make your, how to pick up Google searches, how to make your listings get stickier in that way. That would help with the search engines. One of our readers is wondering about that.
Sure, and it's really relevant. And the first thing I'll always say is that always is and is always going to be a kind of a moving target. And, for me, in my job every day, in a marketing job, in a business-to-business organization, I'm always trying to figure that out as well for my products and brands. And, I talked a lot about just being try to get as specific as you can about the product that you're advertising. That's kind of that SEO side because you're going to get rewarded search engines. Again, I alluded to third-party sites for being complete in your merchandising, photos, videos, elements like that, having that presence on YouTube from a video perspective. You can get that obviously helps you out as well in terms of where people are searching. And then you just got to kind of stay up on the latest best practices too. They're always kind of changing, and the way that Google is rewarding is always changing. But what I've seen is really constant is the more specific you can be, the more kind of targeted towards the message to a consumer with a very specific message is always going to help you there.
Just to follow up a little bit on that, you always want to use the model year in the header field, or does that, if it's an older used car, does that hurt you if you putting a 2010 Honda Civic? Is that advisable to always have the model year in that field?
I think so, because there's a buyer kind of segment for all of those pieces of inventory, and you want them to find that inventory. And I would actually, Phil, take it a step further and not just use year, make, model, but I've seen a lot of dealerships in their kind of headers on their listings use more than that, the style description, the trim, get even more detailed, maybe with tech package is another thing to put in those listings. That will also help you as well. So I would get more specific and more descriptive. I've seen that really help dealerships across the board in their advertising.
Oh, that's really interesting. the different listing, the syndicate websites, they all attract different shoppers. How do I account for that and appeal to several types of buyers in one listing?
Good question. And the good news is, as kind of been the red thread through my presentation, the technology is getting to a space to be more targeted in what you're saying per your different advertising channel. These capabilities are becoming more available now. So let's say on a third-party listing site, you want to talk about how your inventory or your experience in the store is different from the competition. Or you want to go play the price battle and you want to put a call out in there, then that's good to do on a third-party site because you're battling for those eyeballs. But you can vary up that message then when they get to your website to talk about the customer experience, to talk about what you're willing to do for them, service after the sale, things like that. So I would say just being targeted, understanding your audience in those different areas, and using the technology to the full extent to be able to connect with them in an authentic way and also a meaningful way, depending on where they are in the cycle. Like on a third-party site, they may still be kind of evaluating different options and drilling down into that inventory. And when they're on your website, maybe they're more geographic, or they've selected, if you're a franchise dealer, they've selected an OEM brand that they want to dig deeper into. So it's time for you to talk to them a little bit about you and what you can do for them, and also why the inventory is special, but also why you're special as well as dealer operators.
Okay. You mentioned geography there. If you could, are there certain things that certain dealers need to know in certain regions or different states? Are there some regional differences in effectiveness in how to post a listing like this? Are there some states where, or certain regions that might value a listing, more than others? What kind of nuances are out there?
That's really interesting. The only thinking I've done around nuances is more around regulations, things like the CCPA and what type of data do you have access to, and kind of how do you message or market, or how can you kind of still kind of follow those regulations but still kind of be compelling in your listings. Also, some other things around being able to advertise that car while it's still in transit, it's not physically there with the title, and how you can kind of do that pre-merchandising or in-transit merchandising. Most of the time you can just disclose that the vehicle is en route to the dealership and you're okay. But another interesting thing to that, Phil, and I know that this isn't the direct answer, but it's something that I'm seeing more and more, and it's dealers kind of merchandising and advertising cars outside of just their local area, being able to target buyers in other states or other regions within their state that maybe they weren't doing before. I think that's going to create a lot of really interesting challenges and a lot of things to consider, because you're going to have to know that audience, and maybe you just don't know them as well as your local area. Maybe you've had your dealership there for several years, or you've grown up kind of doing marketing of vehicles in the area, and you want to kind of be a little bit more national. I think you are going to have to change up your merchandising strategy to understand that audience and what really drives them. I think reading up on a lot of great publications that come out, Cox Automotive and outside of Cox Automotive as well, just in terms of consumer buying and how that varies across the country. I think that's something to consider for sure.
All right. Should I follow the same, these same methods when listing vehicles on social media, or are there different things to consider for that audience on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or any number of social media platforms? What are some best practices if I want to list something, in the social media space?
Yeah, I would say on things like Facebook Marketplace, it's really turning into like a listing site similar to a third-party site. So a lot of these same merchandising rules will apply. But I think even within the Facebook side, using customer testimonials and references and bringing it into the people side of your business or the people side of car shopping is another good best practice. And then I think when it comes into that people side, that experience itself, I think really does lend itself well to Instagram, as well as some vehicle merchandising, but I would almost think about that like video, live walkarounds, and 360s is, be selective and have a really strong why to bring that into like an Instagram type of experience. And then with the Twitter side, I think that's for really quick information, sales, new model years in, directing them to other types of content that's relevant to your inventory, relevant to your dealership. I do think they all require their own slightly different strategies, but if you're merchandising the cars right and have a good way of distributing them, or using a third party or agency model to distribute them and handle social media, the merchandising you're doing on all of those things is really going to be essential. Even if you're varying the message slightly.
All right, audience, we still have time for a couple more questions. So if you're sitting on the sidelines wondering if you should ask a question, go right ahead. We have time to get to most of them. Russ, you mentioned video, and this is kind of a bizarre question, but do we want to make the video entertaining at all? Do you want to add music? Do you want to add a sales pitch, someone talking during the video tour of the vehicle? Does it make any sense? Is there much ROI to make the video somewhat entertaining?
I've seen dealerships really, really invest time and effort into elaborate videos with, really detailed walkarounds and spending a lot of time in there and really developing a reputation for having that content. So I've seen it be effective, specifically on luxury and large truck dealers as well, just because there's a lot of information and things that you need to know, and those details matter with those product lines. But you don't have to make that heavy investment. Like I mentioned before, if you're investing into a good photo solution, there are stitched videos that can be created, and a lot of those things like music and more ways to make it interactive and attention grabbing is something to definitely consider and something to definitely do. If you think about a video that you'd be watching, whether it's a car advertisement or whether it's anything else, not having a little bit of a guided tour around that or some audio to be able to help kind of grab that attention, it's not as compelling in most industries. So I think that we should add those elements in. Think about the time you have to invest. You got to have some base level video strategy in place today, and just from there, just stair step it. See if it's driving increased traffic, and then you can make a decision about, hey, do I want to invest a little bit more time into live walk around, video, really, really in-depth narration. I would just stair step that a little bit. And just because you can't get to this big, sophisticated strategy doesn't mean there's not a video solution out there for you or a video strategy. There definitely is.
Sure, and I would guess you could have an embed code that you can simply put in that, with a template ad for your dealership maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Pre-roll,
post-roll, yeah.
Perfect, yeah. I think I want to try it myself.
Great. We know how it goes, Bill.
Yeah, well, we try these things here at Automotive News as well. We have a very good video team and works very hard every day. This will be the last question unless there's any more questions out there. So this is last call for questions if anyone has any. But I'm going to get this question is, I'm getting vehicles merchandised in under 30 days, but in what other ways can I improve that timeline?
So the one I talked about, well, I would say that there's two. So the first one is think about the pre-merchandising techniques. So if the car is at a decent condition, either from the auction or from trade-in, make sure that if it needs a lot of work on the exterior, you don't want to take photos and videos of that. But if it's in an okay condition, we're seeing that if you can merchandise those cars a little quicker, you get the eyeballs quicker. And then within that 30-day cycle, I'm going to say something else there. It's great you're getting it merchandised that way, is being able to make updates and kind of re-merchandise that car, to re-energize it. It's almost treated like a refreshed listing, so you'll get rewarded there. And relevant content that's in there as well, around pricing or around bringing in the age or the condition of that car, over time, is another good best practice. So I would say like pre-merchandising, so like pre-frontline ready, and re-merchandising. Doing it again after you've done it the first time to give it new life are definitely two things to consider.
And to wrap it up, how about giving us a couple of 2, 3, or 4 absolutely do not do, not best practices, but what are the worst practices that you see out there, and you should warn people not to do when they're preparing these listings?
Well, I think that the absolute do not do's. So we should think about that through the lens of like what is very easily possible for you. And if you're listing, first of all, if you're listing cars individually, if you're spending a lot of time, if you're using multiple tools to get the job done, you're using multiple tools to list cars, you're just asking for issues and you're asking for inefficiency. So try to streamline where the inventory is being distributed from as much as you can. If you have all these different tools doing all these different things, it's hard to keep track of. That would be one. Trying to think of another one. I would say, if you run into issues with the technology or you run into issues with time constraints, one or the other, don't ignore different elements of these 7 action items, especially the description side. So if you don't have time and you don't love the technology, I still think you should consider using the technology to generate the descriptions just because it's going to help you show up better in search. So maybe just because you don't have time or the technology to do it in an amazing way doesn't mean you should ignore it altogether.
All right, last question. When I'm hiring someone, if I'm a dealer manager or I'm a service or sales or service manager at a dealership, what do you think is the preferred profile for hiring for this kind of position for someone who will do this for my dealership? Do I look for a journalist, someone who's very familiar with content, or do I look for somebody that's just tech savvy and it's already working for me and transfer them into this kind of role? What do you think? When you see clients doing this, where do they find the right kind of talent to execute this kind of strategy?
Yeah, I mean that's a really interesting question, one I've dug into as well, and we've done some persona work on things like an internet sales manager or a digital marketing manager, and a lot of that is leaning more towards being the tech savvy, being able to use the tools, understand how to leverage the tools, keep up with trends that are going on both in the tools you're using, the software you're using, but also in the display side to be able to know what's working today. We're definitely seeing it lean more that way. I think another good point to that is within your dealership, you have a lot of experience in the automotive industry most of the time. So to bring in somebody that's more tech savvy or knows marketing, digital marketing in a deeper way, combined with the kind of industry knowledge you can kind of generate within your store, can create a really good combination for like creating really high quality merchandising.
Well, terrific. This has been one heck of a good webinar. So thank you very much. Thanks to today's audience for the questions that we had. If you wanted to get a question in later and we didn't get a chance to answer it, HomeNet can follow up with you by email. If you learned something from this session, please tell your peers about it. The recording will be available in about an hour, and you'll find it at autonews.com/powertraining. When the webinar ends, a survey is going to pop up on your screen. Your feedback helps us create future webinars that are even more beneficial to you. So thanks again to Russ and HomeNet for bringing us this excellent presentation, and to you for joining us. On behalf of everybody at Automotive News, have a great rest of your day.